Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a few notes before we get started. We are recording this webinar, and I've placed the system in lecture mode to keep down background noise. This does mean you can only listen in at this time. At the end of the webinar, we'll open the lines for a full Q&A. At that time, we encourage you to ask your questions live over the phone or through the online chat feature. But please feel free to type any questions you may have in the chat feature throughout the presentation. As a reminder, please don't place your phone on hold while the phone lines are live. Hold music may drown out anyone speaking. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Mario Carrasco is a co-founder and online research director of ThinkNow Research, which specializes in research of the U.S. Hispanic consumer. In addition to today's webinar, Mario will present a session at Travel Exchange in Atlanta this coming year. Welcome, Mario.
Thank you, Philip, and hello, everyone. Thank you to the NTA for putting this on. We have some great research for you to share with you all regarding Hispanic travel trends. Wanted to start off a little bit talking about the year the travel industry has had. It's quite a tumultuous year in terms of some of the mergers here, U.S. Airways, America West, and a lot more on the airline side. Also in terms of car rentals, you have National, Enterprise, and that's not to mention the travel websites, and of course one of the largest mergers, the Marriott and Starwood. So definitely an eventful year for the travel industry, to say the least. And there's, so in terms of what's driving this, there's a lot of speculation that the sharing economy is driving this, and looking specifically, for example, at Airbnb, now evaluated at $20 billion, which a company that didn't really exist five years ago. So there's definitely some new competition in the travel space, and definitely something worth looking at in reference to each of our travel businesses. And with that, there are some reports. New York was one of the first cities to take a look at specifically the sharing economy and looking at Airbnb and what kind of implications that meant for the economy there. They noticed that Airbnb accounted for 2.9 million or 7.8% of the overnight stays in New York, and estimating a loss of 88.9 million in hotel and food spending, which in the grand scheme of things really not that big, but again, for a company that's only been around for 5 years, definitely worth taking a look at. And here, of course, I think now we're proponents of taking a look at Hispanics as a potential growth opportunity for you all. Kind of opening the stage before we delve into the specific travel research, Hispanics are expected to number 66 million and make up almost 19% of the population by the year 2020. So in terms of just sheer numbers, Hispanics are definitely the demographic that you want to be looking at as tour operators, hoteliers, etc. And when we delve a little bit deeper into demographics, you'll see on average Hispanics are younger. They have larger households compared to non-Hispanics, and this translates into larger party sizes when traveling. And then looking just at sheer purchasing power, you'll see we're at 1.2 trillion. So if we isolate the U.S. Hispanic demographic purchasing power today, it's larger than almost 13 of the world's economies. So in terms of numbers, a great market for you all to be looking at. And some other things that are noteworthy about the Hispanic demographic is the optimism. We took a look at optimism regarding the economy, 2012, 2013, and then again in 2013 and 2014, and you'll see to the right that Hispanics have a greater optimism when it comes to the economy. And this correlates to a myriad of different things in regards to spending, but of course, one of the most important in this context is travel. right? When people are more optimistic, more likely to travel and spend money on travel. And another demographic point to note about Hispanics that's really overlooked is upscale Hispanics. Approximately 4 in 10 Hispanic households fall into the upscale or affluent income groups. So really almost on par with non-Hispanics that are just over 5 in 10. And the way that we define upscale is a household income of $50,000 to $99,000, and affluent is $100,000 plus. So you have an optimistic group with a large purchasing power and also a large household income. Now we'll be diving into the travel trends report that we conducted. A little bit on the methodology. We conducted over 1,000 interviews, and this was a nationally representative sample. This was done in the month of April, and we quoted it to make sure that it is reflective of the U.S. Hispanic population at large, taking gender, region, and primary language into consideration. And this is a little bit about our acculturation model that I'm going to be speaking to in the data. We have 3 acculturation buckets, so more acculturated, bicultural, and less acculturated. You may have heard of this, and I'll just touch on it briefly. More acculturated Hispanics are more likely to be U.S. born, speak English only, consume English media. Bicultural, they can be born in or outside the U.S., speak Spanish and English equally, consume media in both languages. And then the less acculturated, more likely to be foreign born, speak Spanish only, and consume media in Spanish only. So here the first section, we're going to take a look at numbers of vacations taken. So here we took a look and asked our U.S. Hispanic and non-Hispanic respondents about the number of times that they traveled in the past 2 years. Here's we looked at it's about 4.3 average vacation for Hispanics and 3.7 for non-Hispanics. So this is definitely a statistically significant trend in terms of Hispanics taking almost 1 more vacation per year than non-Hispanics. And then you can see we broke it out into getaways and mini vacations, and we'll go into that a little bit further in some of the next slides, but you'll see that Hispanics more likely to take more getaways and mini vacations than longer full vacations. Looking at that same data and breaking it out a little bit differently, breaking it out by household income, you'll see that the number of vacations varies considerably by household income. Hispanics in the higher income group averaging a little bit over 7 vacations in the past 2 years. So this is twice as many as Hispanics in the lower income bracket. And looking at that same 80K plus in the Hispanic section and versus the 80K plus in non-Hispanic, you'll see it's almost 2 whole vacations more that they're taking per year. So a big driver here for Hispanics is that more the affluent Hispanic traveler taking a lot more vacations. And breaking it out again in a slightly different way, this is taking a look at acculturation and children in the household. Interesting thing to point out here, more acculturated, taking less vacations. Bicultural, taking the most average vacations per year at 4.8, almost 5. And then a big difference here that we'll see later on, Hispanics more likely to travel with children. So those households with children in the household, almost 5 vacations per year versus no children at 3.8. We also wanted to take a look at, do Hispanic travel trends versus non-Hispanic travel trends differ in terms of traveling inside and outside of the U.S.? And actually there is a big difference here. Hispanics twice as likely as non-Hispanics to take a vacation outside of the U.S. So in the past 2 years, Hispanics taking an average of 1.3 vacations outside of the U.S. versus non-Hispanics at 0.6. Now, if we take a look at vacations in the U.S., it's almost on par, 3 versus 3.1. Again, breaking out this question in terms of outside versus or international travel versus U.S. travel. As you would expect, the least acculturated group averages the most vacations outside of the U.S. So almost 4 vacations outside of the U.S. And biculturally at 4.8. And again, taking a look at it from an income level, you'll see that the higher income, again, driving this international travel. In this next section here, we'll take a deeper dive, taking a look at, what are those travel trends when Hispanics do travel in the U.S. We took a look at where Hispanics have traveled in terms of states in the U.S. And some interesting differences here to note. At the top for Hispanics, California, so 41% of Hispanics traveling to California, versus non-Hispanics at the top of the list was Florida. And looking at Hispanics and non-Hispanics, the percentage was actually the same for Florida, 36%. Significantly more Hispanics traveling to New York and Texas as a place of travel within the U.S., and Nevada rounding out the top 5 there. And in terms of, we want to take a look at how are Hispanics traveling when they do travel inside of the U.S., what the main method of travel was to the destination. And on their last vacation inside the U.S., Hispanics are just as likely to fly by airplane as they were to drive their own vehicle. And personal vehicle is the main method of travel in the U.S. for non-Hispanics. So definitely some considerations here for you all. Hispanics much more likely to travel by air, so having keeping that in mind when catering to U.S. Hispanic travelers, that's pretty important. 42% of Hispanics traveling by air versus 31% of non-Hispanics. And we see, conversely, non-Hispanics, almost 56% using their personal vehicle to travel within the U.S. So this is likely points to that Hispanics are traveling outside of their home state. And we wanted to take a look at also when they're traveling in the U.S., how many people are in their party. And slightly more in the party group among Hispanics, 3.2 versus 3.1, but almost the same. Where we do see a larger difference is taking a look at the percent of Hispanics who took their children on the last U.S. trip, 52% of Hispanics versus 47%. So average party size, almost the same, but U.S. Hispanics more likely to take their children on vacation than non-Hispanics. Here we start to see some really kind of important differences in terms of Hispanic travel trends versus U.S. Hispanic. we wanted to take a look at how much money was spent on the last vacation that they could think of by all the members in the immediate party. This includes transportation, lodging, meals, activities, etc. And if we look at this, we see a pretty big difference. Hispanics spending $2,641 on their last trip on average versus $2,363 for non-Hispanics. Nearly $300 more compared to non-Hispanics. So in terms of a return on investment when trying to attract this traveler, definitely, the ROI is there. We wanted to also break out this spend by acculturation level and household income. So breaking it out by acculturation level on the chart on the left here and household income on the right. And interestingly, the least acculturated and bicultural spend more on U.S. vacations than the most acculturated. And so the less acculturated being more likely Spanish dominant, and the bicultural being more likely speaking both languages, both Spanish and English. So again, an important consideration when you consider what type of Hispanic you want to attract. Spanish language definitely important. And then taking a look at household income, of course you see as you go up on the income scale, the amount of spend per vacation goes up considerably, topping at the 80K plus. You have U.S. Hispanic households spending $3,782 on average per trip. Now we're going to take a look at some of the travel trends outside of the U.S. And again, we wanted to see where, for those that have traveled outside of the U.S. in the past 2 years, where they have traveled. And for Hispanics, Mexico tops the list at 46%, almost twice as many Hispanics visiting Mexico than non-Hispanics. South America, 10% of Hispanics versus 3%. And then Caribbean countries, 31% versus 26%. So Mexico is easily the top foreign destination among Hispanics, but non-Hispanics also travel to Mexico. Are more likely to have traveled to regions outside of Latin America compared to Hispanics. Here's the data presented in a slightly different way, in a chart format, so you can see all of the countries that we asked. And then we dove specifically into the cities that they were visiting in those countries. So for Mexico, among Hispanics, the biggest draw was Mexico City, with 17% of Hispanics that have visited Mexico visiting Mexico City. Cancun, interestingly, for those that visited Mexico, Hispanics and non-Hispanics almost visiting Cancun equally. And then on the non-Hispanic side, we see England being the biggest draw among non-Hispanics. So for non-Hispanics that traveled to Europe, England was the biggest draw. And this data here is the same question that we took a look at in the U.S., but looking at it outside of the U.S. And as you would expect, air is the main mode of travel for traveling outside of the U.S., and this goes for both Hispanic and non-Hispanic. Personal vehicle number 2, but again, non-Hispanics over-indexing Hispanics there at 23% of non-Hispanics using their personal vehicles for travel outside of the U.S. And then cruise ship much more popular among non-Hispanics than Hispanics. So 11% of non-Hispanics using a cruise ship to travel internationally versus only 4% of Hispanics. So definitely an opportunity there for people in the cruise industry to perhaps attract more Hispanics. We looked at that same question in terms of number of people on last trip and percentage who took children on last trip. And similar to the last question, we see the mean number about the same, 3 people on average in the Hispanic travel group versus 2.7 of non-Hispanic. But where we see a difference really kind of jump up is the percent of Hispanics that took children on the last trip. 60% of Hispanics took their children on their international trip versus 43% of non-Hispanics. So for tour operators operating internationally or any other, travel-related business operating internationally, children is going to be a big consideration for drawing Hispanics. And here we take a look again at the amount spent on the last trip outside of the U.S. And here the numbers are much more similar than the travel inside of the U.S. So both Hispanic and non-Hispanic travelers spent an average of $4,800 on their last vacation outside of the U.S. So where we see the real big difference in terms of spend is U.S. Hispanics spending more, an average of $300 more per trip inside of the U.S. But when we look at it internationally, they're spending about the same. And breaking out this spend by acculturation and household income, you'll see that the amount of Hispanics spent on vacation outside of the U.S. increases significantly as household income increases. So taking a look at the lower income bracket, we see about $4,000 spent per trip versus the higher income bracket at $80,000 or more, it's over $6,000 per trip. And taking a look at the left on the acculturation level, not too much difference here, but what we do see a small spike is the bicultural group spending a little bit over $5,000 per trip. So the higher income Hispanics spending more per trip, and then again the bicultural Hispanics spending more per international trip. Our next section, we're going to be taking a look at general travel habits and preferences of Hispanics versus non-Hispanics. And we wanted to take a look here at the top reasons for embarking on a leisure trip. So this means a non-business trip. And Hispanics and non-Hispanics go on vacation mainly to rest and relax and enjoy new experiences and spend time with spouse or family. So big differences to note here is that for non-Hispanics, rest, relaxation, and recharge is by far the number one reason for non-Hispanics to go on vacation. Taking a look at Hispanics, rest, relaxation, enjoying new experience, and spend time with spouse and family are almost the same. Exploring new lands and cultures, much more important among Hispanics, 32% versus 27%. And towards the bottom here, I think an interesting trend to point out, looking at, I think it's the third from the bottom here, experience one faith and spirituality. 7% of Hispanics saying that faith-based travel is important to them versus 4% of non-Hispanics. And I know attending the MTA, faith-based travel is growing. So looking at Hispanics as a growth opportunity is definitely worth looking at. wanted to take a look here. This whole section, by the way, is both U.S. and international travel. We wanted to take a look at what's important when choosing a vacation. We asked how important are each of these when it comes to choosing a vacation, vary somewhat, etc. And things that jump out in terms of differences, rich cultural and history, 74% of Hispanics say that's important versus 64% of non-Hispanics. Beaches, recommended by others. Kid-friendly, as you would imagine, they're more likely to travel with their children. Good nightlife. So all of these aspects of choosing a vacation much more important to Hispanics than non-Hispanics. And then another big opportunity here that I think is of particular importance to NTA members, group vacations are much more important to U.S. Hispanics. So almost 60% of Hispanics say that offering group vacations or tour important versus 41% of non-Hispanics. So I think that's a great opportunity for those tour operators to start targeting U.S. Hispanics. And we broke out some of the top reasons, top things that are important to Hispanics when choosing a vacation. We broke it out by less acculturated, bicultural, and more acculturated. So going from left to right, you'll see each of the acculturation buckets. And so a lot of factors are more important to the less acculturated, and again, less acculturated being Spanish dominant, foreign born. So taking a look at beaches, for example, much more important to the less acculturated Hispanic. Almost 80% of less acculturated Hispanics find beaches are important. Word of mouth, recommended by others, again, much more important to the less acculturated and bicultural. Kid-friendly, more important by the less acculturated and bicultural. So a lot of these factors that we see that are specific to Hispanics are being driven by the less acculturated and bicultural. So when thinking about targeting this group, language is going to be a big consideration here. For this next question, we wanted to take a look at how the destination was determined for the last vacation. So what are some of the factors that went into choosing the destination? And if we look at the data here among Hispanics, the single biggest factor for choosing their last vacation is that they have family there. And I've been there before was the top influencer among non-Hispanics. So again, we're seeing this theme, more likely to travel with children, family. So family, a big, important, big part of Hispanic travel. So 34% of Hispanics traveling to a destination because they have family there. Another data point that jumped out, special events or wedding, 15% versus 8% of non-Hispanics. And for non-Hispanics, the biggest reason, the biggest determination for the last vacation destination was I like it, have been there before. So some interesting differences there to note in terms of what's determining Hispanic destination travel versus non-Hispanic. And again, taking a look at this, at determining how the destination was decided upon, we took a look at it by acculturation level. And I have family there, again, being driven by the less acculturated. And another thing of note, saw this location advertised online. Online advertising is working among U.S. Hispanics and is particularly powerful among the less acculturated. So for those of you that are using online advertisements to draw people to your destination, Spanish online advertising might be a consideration as 11% of the less acculturated U.S. Hispanics determine their destination by using an online advertising. And another thing of note, travel agent, again, important among the less acculturated, almost 10% chose their destination based on a travel agent recommendation. And again, language would be another important factor here in terms of travel agent. This slide here, we're taking a look at attitudes about vacation. So we served respondents a series of statements, and they indicated to us how much they agree or disagree with each of the statements. So taking a look at Hispanics, children have much more influence on the vacation destination compared to non-Hispanics. And Hispanics are also more likely to feel that booking a vacation is difficult. So if we take a look at the statement, my children influence where we decide to go on vacation, almost 60% of U.S. Hispanics agreed with that statement versus 43%. So for those of you looking to attract the U.S. Hispanic traveler, you might want to think about attracting their children, highlighting some child-friendly activities or amenities that you have. On the flip side, it looks like U.S. Hispanics tend to have more difficulty with booking a vacation, so finding that process more difficult than non-Hispanics. And I think this could be linked to language issues in terms of not necessarily all booking sites being Spanish friendly. That could be causing some of this difficulty when booking a vacation. And taking a look at attitudes by vacation broken out by acculturation, you will see to the right, planning and booking a vacation is difficult, again, driven by the less acculturated and bicultural. So my hypothesis is that it was language. Definitely shown in the data here that it's likely being driven by not having access to Spanish language websites to book their vacations. And looking at children, again, the less acculturated are more likely to travel with their children. So as you can imagine, their children having much more influence on where they decide to go on vacation. And here we want to take a look at what type of a vacation are they taking. Are they taking short vacations, multiple short vacations, or taking a few long ones? And looking at Hispanics specifically, Hispanics in the low and medium income groups prefer to take many short trips versus fewer long ones. So bicultural and less acculturated Hispanics taking many more short vacations as opposed to long vacations. So again, interesting implications for those of you that are tour operators or hoteliers. Definitely catering to a short kind of condensed time period is the way to go for U.S. Hispanics. On this slide, we wanted to take a look at what months are Hispanics most likely to travel. And we took a look at this in comparison, Hispanics and non-Hispanics. We'll see the trend is pretty similar. Main differences to point out, non-Hispanics much more likely to travel in the summer months. So 52% in June, 53% in July, 46% in August. So high travel months. And non-Hispanics are traveling more in those months as well, but not as big rates as non-Hispanics. And a big difference here, statistically significant difference in December. Hispanics much more likely, almost a quarter of Hispanics traveling in December versus 21% of non-Hispanics. Taking a look at North America, specifically U.S., Canada, Mexico, Caribbean, we wanted to get at what the ideal duration for a vacation is, and for Hispanics that's 6 days and non-Hispanics 5.6, so almost on par there. with Hispanics traveling a little bit longer in North America, and I think that's driven by the international travel there. And outside of North America, we see the converse happening. Non-Hispanics traveling for slightly more, 8.6 versus 8.3. It's not statistically significant, so we can say, on average, the number of days outside of North America is about the same for Hispanics and non-Hispanics. We wanted to take a look at travel preferences, and here specifically looking at traveling alone versus traveling with others. One thing we saw interesting come out of the data is how popular traveling alone is among non-Hispanics. So non-Hispanics, almost 40% prefer traveling alone versus only 28% of Hispanics. And then looking at the flip side of that, 72% of Hispanics prefer traveling with someone versus 61% of non-Hispanics. So the data here definitely shows Hispanics enjoy traveling with others much more than non-Hispanics. Next section here, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into how Hispanics book vacations differently or the same than non-Hispanics. And here we asked, when booking a vacation, do you prefer package deals, so hotel, air, rental activities, or purchasing separately? And we'll see one of the biggest differences here, Hispanics much more likely to book a package deal. And this is driven by, again, the less acculturated and the bicultural Hispanics. So 32% of Hispanics attracted to having a package deal versus 24%. And then separately, we see the converse, 34% of non-Hispanics preferring to book each component of their vacation separately. And the no preference is about the same for each group. And here we wanted to see how far in advance research for the vacation was done. So for the thinking again of your last vacation, how far in advance did you begin researching your trip? And here we find that non-Hispanics begin researching for vacations earlier than Hispanics. So non-Hispanics, the 4 to 5 months before a vacation was the most popular choice for non-Hispanics, whereas Hispanics more likely to book 2 to 3 months before, with 26% of Hispanics booking 2 to 3 months before and 22% booking 4 weeks, 1 month before. So researching and booking happening in a shorter time span for Hispanics than non-Hispanics. And again, what we did here, we compiled in 1 month before or less. And when we look at that, we see that for the most part, most vacations are booked 1 month in advance. But again, the main difference is a larger portion of non-Hispanics booking their vacation 4 to 5 months in advance. Looking at how Hispanics and non-Hispanics booked their last trip, online is by far the main method for booking travel. So 62% of Hispanics booking their travel online and 60% of non-Hispanics. The big difference here is a travel agent. Close to 20% of Hispanics are using a travel agent either over the phone or in person versus 13% of non-Hispanics. So travel agents seem to play a bigger role in the Hispanic community than non-Hispanics who are booking travel. For those that chose online, we want to take a little deeper dive and see what websites, are there any differences in terms of websites? And we see it's pretty similar here for both Hispanics and non-Hispanics. Expedia topping the list for both, and many Hispanics and non-Hispanics booking directly with the hotel or the airline. Some minor differences with Travelocity, more Hispanics likely to use Travelocity, 10% versus 6%. And down at the bottom, some websites, Orbitz, 7% of Hispanics using Orbitz versus 3%. Yahoo Travel, 5% of Hispanics using that versus 2% of non-Hispanics. But for the most part here, we don't see too big of differences in terms of the type of online websites that both of the demographics are using. I touched upon this earlier here in terms of group tour, but we want to take a look at interest in joining an organized group or tour. And Hispanics express much more interest in joining an organized group or tour than non-Hispanics. So overall, 72% of Hispanics were either very interested, somewhat interested in joining a tour versus 61% of non-Hispanics. And if we look at that top box, those that are very interested, 30% of Hispanics very interested versus 19% of non-Hispanics. So this is some really positive data for those of you that are operating organized group tours. Hispanics tend to have more affinity towards that. And if we look at what they value in travel in terms of looking at culture and experiencing new things, I think this is in line with what an organized group or tour would bring the Hispanic traveler. So definitely some opportunity there in terms of having more organized group tours, marketing and winning some of this Hispanic business. And we want to take a look at what is driving this this difference among Hispanic and non-Hispanics for joining a tour group. Saving money is a big driver for Hispanics, 51%. Efficiency, increased safety, camaraderie. Some of the very similar things as non-Hispanics in terms of what's driving these wanting to join a tour group. In this next section here, we're focused on accommodations and airlines. And here we're taking a look at the type of accommodations that Hispanics are more likely to stay versus non-Hispanics. And mid-scale hotels are the most common types of hotels among both segments. Hispanics are more likely to stay with a friend or family member on vacation versus non-Hispanics. So mid-scale hotel, 41% versus 46% of non-Hispanics. And Hispanics much more likely to stay at a friend or family member's home when traveling, 40% versus 30% of non-Hispanics. And breaking out that same question by acculturation and income, we see those that tend to stay at family or friends' home tend to be the less acculturated Hispanics, so 50% of the less acculturated saying that they stay at friends or family's home. And in terms of income, it's going to be, again, driven by the lower income Hispanics, so 40K or less. And looking specifically at brands, Marriott, Holiday Inn, and Hilton are the top hotels used by Hispanics and non-Hispanics. So not too much difference here in terms of the type of hotels being used among Hispanics and non-Hispanics. In terms of leisure travel, this is actually a slide that we hit on earlier. I'm going to go ahead and skip this. Taking a look at the airlines being used, really no significant differences among Hispanic and non-Hispanic. Southwest at the top for both groups, and then Delta second for both, and American. Only big difference of note, JetBlue much more popular among Hispanics than non-Hispanics. Future destinations. I'm sure this is of interest to everyone. Where are Hispanics and non-Hispanics planning to go in the next year? On a high level, we want to take a look at continents. So we asked which of the following 7 continents are you most interested in visiting and exploring? Europe is the continent that Hispanics are most interested in visiting and exploring, and North America is the top destination among non-Hispanics. So interestingly, Hispanics really showing an interest in visiting Europe, almost 40% versus 29% of non-Hispanics. And conversely, non-Hispanics interested in exploring North America, 36% versus 20% of Hispanics. And looking at a desired vacation, so we asked where are you planning to go on vacation or would like to go in the next 12 months? Hispanics significantly more likely to travel to Mexico, Caribbean, and other Latin American countries versus non-Hispanics. And non-Hispanics, again, more likely to travel to somewhere in the U.S. And taking a look at specifically some of the countries and cities, some things to note. Brazil and Colombia, top destinations in South America for Hispanics. Spain, Hispanics much more likely to want to go to Spain than non-Hispanics. And Puerto Rico, the top destination for Caribbean countries for Hispanics. And breaking it out by acculturation, you'll see the least acculturated and bicultural is significantly more likely to travel in the next 12 months compared to the most acculturated. So again, as we've seen throughout this presentation, the less acculturated bicultural consumer among the U.S. Hispanic market is really one to focus on. And taking a look at what states Hispanics and non-Hispanics are looking to visit in the next 12 months, the top 5 come up again with California at the top for Hispanics, Florida at the top for non-Hispanics, Hawaii popping up as a much more likely destination for Hispanics than non-Hispanics, with 12% of Hispanics looking to visit Hawaii versus 5%. And interestingly, Louisiana, 5% of Hispanics looking to travel to Louisiana versus 1% of Hispanics. Here we want to take a look at amusement parks and cruises. Here we asked which of the following amusement park or resorts would you consider visiting in the next 12 months. Walt Disney World and Resort, both the top amusement parks for both Hispanics and non-Hispanics. However, among Hispanics, Disneyland, California Adventure, and Universal Studios are much more likely than non-Hispanics, with almost 40% of Hispanics stating they want to visit there versus 29% of non-Hispanics. And non-Hispanics more likely to visit amusement parks such as SeaWorld, Orlando Resort, and Busch Gardens. We want to take a look at when visiting the theme parks, would they need hotel or lodging? Vast majority will need lodging when visiting these amusement parks. For those of you in the cruise industry, we wanted to take a look at how interested both Hispanics and non-Hispanics would be in taking a cruise in the next 12 months. 2/3 of Hispanics expressed interest in taking a cruise in the next year. Interest was relatively even with non-Hispanics. So not much of a difference here. And as I pointed out, Hispanics are less likely to report that they have been on a cruise in the past 12 months. So again, definitely an opportunity here for cruise operators to attract a more Hispanic audience. And if we break out those who were interested in taking a cruise, you'll see that it's really being driven by the higher income Hispanic. In terms of where the interest lies, where they would like to go on a cruise, for Hispanics, the Caribbean tops the destination, 52%, although non-Hispanics are much more likely to want to visit the Caribbean, 66%. 29% of Hispanics looking to take a cruise to Mexico versus 15% of non-Hispanics. And so that concludes kind of the data portion here. This last section here, just some kind of summation or tips we have for you all in terms of attracting the Hispanic traveler. So family, one thing that we've seen throughout all of this data, family is very important to Hispanics. So Hispanic households with children are more likely to go on vacations. Kid-friendly is an important attribute. Vacation destinations more influenced by children. So for those of you looking to attract more Hispanics to your businesses, one of the most important things you can do is gearing your website towards family. So displaying family packages or discounts, clearly highlighting family-friendly amenities and nearby recreational attraction. And then one thing, ensuring your website is mobile optimized. Kids are using a mobile phone for their entrance into the internet, and so having a mobile optimized website is really important in attracting this audience. Another factor that we see throughout this data is that Hispanics are experience-driven. So things like rich cultural history are important, more attracted to tours and tour groups. Beaches, local attractions are important. So leveraging the family experience factor is something you all can do. Identifying what it is that you have that may be attractive to families and calling attention to that. So things like cultural attractions, recreational centers, natural areas, family restaurants. Identify that what's specific in your business that families might find attractive and call attention to it. And also for those of you that have on-site services, what are some things that you can do to provide for families, like a game night, for example. And one thing that really stood out to us in the research is the Hispanic booking experience. Hispanics are booking primarily online. They're attracted to packages more so than non-Hispanics, more likely to fly than non-Hispanics. And Hispanics find booking, the whole booking experience more difficult. So what are some things that we can do to make it easier for Hispanics to book online? We know word of mouth is very important for Hispanics in choosing a destination, so an easy thing for you all to do would be to highlight positive reviews on the website, where it could be travel sites, it could be Yelp. You could take some of those and show some of the positive reviews that you have on your website. Forming partnerships with local attractions, CVB, and restaurants. It's an easy way to offer to offer coupons or value-added packages. For those of you that have the resources to create a Spanish website, definitely recommend it, as we saw a lot of these travel trends being driven by the less acculturated and the bicultural. And again, Hispanics traveling more using airlines, so airport-friendly service, having a tram, or flight info on the website is another easy way for you to attract this demographic. So this concludes the webinar. I know that there were some questions there, and I think, Catherine, do we have some time to answer some questions here?
Absolutely. And Mario, thank you so much. That was tremendous information. I want everyone to know that ThinkNow Research has been an important and valued partner with NTA in our Hispanic initiative. We're going to open the lines now for your questions, and we're also going to exit lecture mode. I'll pause for just a second for that to happen.
The conference is no longer in lecture mode.
So if you do have a question, you can press *6 to unmute your phone. If you don't have a question, please do keep them muted. And we did have a couple of questions. Let me go back up to the top. Mario, Dennis wanted to know, if we have a Hispanic family visiting California, how likely are they to return? Do you have that information?
That's a very good question. We don't have that specific question. However, California is the top visited destination, so past 12-month visit destination, and the top likely to visit destination in the 12 months. So I would say that it's very high likelihood.
Thank you. And Deanne also had a question. She said on slide 65, Canada, do we know which provinces they plan to visit?
I'll have to check. This was Deanna. I'll have to check to see if we have the provinces, because I know we collected some city data for some of the other countries, so it's likely that we have it and we just didn't report on it, so I'll get back to you on that.
Great. And Scott, you have asked, and several people have asked, how you have access to the online version of this presentation. We do have a mixture of members and prospective members on this particular webinar. NTA members, we do provide access to all of our webinars, and that will be on our website. And we're happy to talk to anyone about joining the association. We would love to, because you have access to great information like what you have heard today. So we'd love to have any more questions. Mario, that was tremendous information, but if you have a question, you can press *6 to unmute your line, or you can type it into the chat feature. And Bob, the webinar recorded version, when that is placed online, you will actually see what is on the screen, and you'll hear the recording as well. So that's how you receive that. Mario, can you think of anything else that you would add?
Really, I didn't have too much time to I guess talk about just the importance of the Hispanic travel. I I think it's a really great opportunity for anybody in the travel industry, from tour operators, hoteliers, cruise ship operators. I think the data speaks for itself that it's a really great segment to target. And also, it like I suggested at the end, with some small changes, I think you can be able to attract this audience. I think a lot of the times people are maybe hesitant to make some changes in their business to attract Hispanic audiences, and it's really about just making the small step towards that can really make some big differences in terms of attracting Hispanic business.
Mario, thank you. I think that is extremely important. That is something that our members do ask, not only that we provide amazing information like this, but also the practical application. So we really appreciate your giving some really good tips along that point. We have one last question from Sonia. She's asking where the research was conducted.
Yeah, great question. So this was a nationally representative sample of U.S. Hispanics. So it was conducted in the U.S. nationwide. Make sure to quote it by census regions, country of origin, language, gender, and age.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mario, once again, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. We know your time is valuable, so we really appreciate your joining us and spending time with us. If you have not registered for Travel Exchange in Atlanta, we hope you will join us, and you'll see contact information that Philip is going to be placing in the chat feature and how you could get in touch with us. We have a great lineup of educational sessions, as well as Encuentro, which will feature roundtable discussions on topics curated by NTA's own Hispanic Market Advisory Group, and they also have helped with some of the content for the omnibus that Mario has just presented. And our Encuentro is sponsored by the Mexico Tourism Board, and then we're going to follow this informative gathering with our first ever fiesta. So we're excited about that, and this party will be hosted by Delta Airlines, Gray Line San Francisco, and Norwegian Cruise Line. So we hope that you all can join us in Atlanta. We've got some great events on this market planned. Thank you again, Mario. Thank you, everyone.